Tom Kozlowski here with you on 104.5 The Team and 104.5theteam.com. Joining us as well, co-host Andrew Williams. And joining us on the phone lines, he represents the 107th District, which consists of parts of Rensselaer, Columbia, and Washington County. Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin. And Assemblyman McLaughlin, why does fantasy daily sports matter so much to Governor Andrew Cuomo?
That's a great question, Tom and Andrew, and thanks for having me on. I'm not sure why it's risen to this level. I think probably, I guess the simple answer would be it probably poses a pretty severe threat, sanctified or acknowledged gambling interests in New York, those that are already here in the form of various lotteries, and those that are continuing to grow, which is casino gambling. So probably they're feeling the threat of fantasy sports. But the reality is, I think that there's a way to legislate this correctly and take care of this issue, and it didn't need to be done with the heavy hand of Andrew Cuomo or Schneiderman.
And Assemblyman McLaughlin, where do you stand on the issue, and how do you think this should be handled?
Well, I mean, listen, I'm all in favor of the fantasy football league. Both of my sons are in fantasy football leagues. In fact, I think they're in a few of them. I personally have never had time to do it, but I find it pretty interesting, and I think it's great. And if the guys and gals out there want to do it, and certainly many of them do, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, here in New York State, they should be allowed to do that. And I think that we don't need another unfriendly toward business attitude coming out of New York, and that's clearly what this is. This is just a slam of another successful business. And as I said the other day, ironically, if they were hemorrhaging cash like Solar City, Andrew Cuomo and Schneiderman would try to build them a headquarters, probably.
He represents the 107th District, which consists of parts of Rensselaer, Columbia, and Washington counties. Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin joins us on the phone lines, and you touched on the idea of trying to regulate daily fantasy sports and hopefully try to find some type of revenue for the state of New York. How would that process go on, and is there a way to still keep this legal in the state?
I really think there is, and I think that's our role as legislators, and that's why I'm so, a little bit upset about what Attorney General Schneiderman's doing, because it was unnecessary for him to come riding in all of a sudden, and this really did kind of come out of the blue. And I have to tell you, my own personal theory is, if you remember back just about a week or two ago, there was a Republican presidential debate, and that was one of the questions, and I thought it was a silly, stupid question to ask of presidential candidates. But there it was, and I'm not so sure that Attorney General Schneiderman didn't get the idea for this investigation, because even in his own press release, he says it's about a month-long investigation. Well, I think he might have gotten the idea from that, and very often with this Attorney General, there's a lot of the stuff that he does is based on press release, and politics, not necessarily what's best for the law or for the people of New York. So I think there's a way to legislate it. I think we're going back into session in January. This can certainly wait until then. And as a matter of fact, the Assembly, both Republicans and Democrats, are having conferences next week. Technically, we could go into a special session and begin to talk about this issue.
And you touched on the idea of that being brought up in the Republican debate. I know a lot of the candidates up on the stage, including Governor Chris Christie, were very vocal about how they thought about the issue even being brought up in that debate. And yeah, there's definitely different waves of where this could go. And what's the next step here in New York? You touched on a bit about some possible meetings in the future, but is there going to be possibly enough pressure from New York citizens? Is there pressure, protesting, things like that may have them reconsider their decision?
I think so. In fact, I hope so. And you saw earlier today, there was a few hundred people protesting outside of Attorney General Schneiderman's office down in New York City, and that was a spur-of-the-moment thing, and there was a couple hundred people out there. With social media, we all live in that world. I know you guys do, and I do with Twitter and Facebook and everything. It's so instantaneous the way you can sway an issue and get support or opposition to an issue, and I think this Attorney General is going to rapidly find that the people of New York want him to focus on other things that matter. For example, a heroin epidemic that is taking our kids' lives and ruining families. Let's focus on that. Let's focus on what's going on. If he's going to send a cease and desist letter, he should probably send it to some of the corrupt legislators that are operating in Albany. But there are many, many more important things than this. So I think that there's a very, very strong possibility that you're going to see such an outcry from the citizens of New York that there's going to be enough pushback to get him to back off. At least I hope so. And also, I would say credit to FanDuel and DraftKings for not backing down. They went right back at him and said, we're going to continue to operate here in the state of New York. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that there's not danger, because you can have the payment processors like Citigroup and other banks refuse to process those payments. So there's some real issues here, but it ultimately comes down to, let's get out of people's lives. Let's let them enjoy themselves a little bit, and we have much bigger fish to fry than guys and gals wanting to have some fun on FanDuel and DraftKings. And also, I would say that what's important about that is just this nanny statism has just got to stop. And for the Attorney General to say that this is strictly games of chance, anybody that's participated in this, there's some pretty skilled people out there doing the analysis. I would say there's a lot of skill involved. It's not necessarily a game of chance, unlike the lottery, which he is certainly okay with because it's sanctioned by the state and they're getting their VIG. That's about a 1 in 292 million chance of winning.
Tom Kozlowski and Andrew Williams here on 104.5, the team in 104.5theteam.com, and joining us on the phone lines. He represents the 107th District, which consists of parts of Rensselaer, Columbia, and Washington counties. Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin.
And Assemblyman, another huge sporting debate in New York is mixed martial arts. It's getting passed through the Senate, but it's getting stuck in the Assembly. What do you think is going to be the future of mixed martial arts in the UFC coming to New York?
Well, that's another battle that has been really going on even before I got to the Assembly, which is now in my fifth year. It's been going on for a long time, and ultimately that's come down to a union battle, and strangely enough, it's not a New York union issue, it's a Las Vegas issue, and they've had just great influence over what's going on in the Assembly. The Senate's done their job, they've passed it, I voted for it, I'm supportive of MMA. I can't tell you that I'm a huge fan of it, it's just not my thing, but I understand what it's all about. I've watched it. I'd prefer to watch football and baseball and basketball and hockey, more traditional sports, but I get it. This is a huge sport. It needs to get passed. And it's, again, another economic engine. Imagine what we could do. You could fill up Madison Square Garden. I have no doubt you could fill up Madison Square Garden. You could certainly fill up the Times Union and different venues around this state. So it's got to get done. And ironically, you can have the amateur fights, but we can't have the professional ones. It just doesn't make sense. And we are just going to continue to keep pressing on that issue, and hopefully we're going to break free and break through on that fairly soon.
And it's funny you bring up Madison Square Garden. UFC every year books an event for the following year in Madison Square Garden. This upcoming year is going to be April. What are the chances you think that fight can actually happen in MSG in 2016?
Well, I hope. I can't tell you that, it's definitely going to happen, because I thought last year we were going to get it done, and we got pretty close. But they just won't let it on the floor, and I'm talking about the Assembly majority, has just not let it on the floor for a vote. And let me tell you, folks, the reason that they won't let it on the floor for a vote by all of us as legislators is because they know it's going to pass if it gets to the floor. So they bottle it up in committee. So for all the folks out there listening throughout the state, pick the phone up and call your assemblyman, call your senator, call the governor's office and say, we want this done. Because in essence, Albany is just basically... it responds to noise, and if the people are making enough noise, the politicians pay attention to that. And if the people aren't making noise, they think it doesn't matter too much to the people. So make some noise, get loud out there. The supporters have got to mobilize as much as possible and lean on their legislators to get this done.
He represents the 107th District, consists of Rensselaer, Columbia, Washington counties. Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin. You can also follow him on Twitter at SteveMCNY. Assemblyman, thank you so much for the time this afternoon, and we'll talk into the near future. Take care.
Hey, pleasure being with you. Take care.